Hey guys, welcome back. Okay, so in this week's tutorial, it is all about lengthening or shortening an A-line dress pattern that we created about 3 weeks ago. So this tutorial kind of should have been done sooner, but I kind of got carried away with our last two tutorials, which was basically printing digital sewing patterns and basic blocks to Violin. There should be a link appearing in the top right corner now. And also sampling digital sewing patterns with Violin. And once again, link in the top right corner. You should definitely go check those tutorials out because they're pretty cool and it's a really fantastic concept. Anyway, that's why I got carried away. So let's get started on this tutorial, which is obviously the one we should have done. Okay, so I'm going to jump onto the Mac. I'm going to open up Adobe Illustrator and also my previously drafted A-line basic dress block. Now, if you haven't seen our tutorial on how to draft an A-line dress block in Adobe Illustrator, then go check that out. There should also be a link appearing in the top right corner now. Anyway, let's get on the Mac and get started. Okay, so here is my A-line dress here's my A-line dress basic block that we created in that last tutorial. You might have a slightly different version. I've added seam allowance and notches to mine and obviously some little labels. But basically what we need to start this tutorial is to kind of like refine this block, or let's say reverse engineer it back to what it used to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove my seam allowance and my notches, and I'm also going to add some, I'm going to transfer the notches to actual, let's say, guidelines rather than notches. So I'm just going to do that very, very quickly and speed that process up. Before we get started though, if you are new to digital pattern cutting in Adobe Illustrator, then we have a whole bunch of really cool tutorials and courses that are completely free, which will show you how to adapt and amend your digital basic blocks into, let's say, PDF sewing patterns or patterns in general. So take a look at that course. You should have a link in the top right hand corner now. Anyway, let's get started. So I'm just going to as I said, I'm just going to remove my seam allowance and prepare my block ready for this process. And I'm just going to speed that up. Okay, so I've now removed my seam allowance, I've removed the notches, and then I've obviously drawn in those guidelines, so they're all contained within the block. It's looking great. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to align these panels so that we can find our rotation points so we can then lengthen or shorten this dress block. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my big selection tool, I'm going to click on the bottom of this little panel here, and I've actually grouped these together. So these lines are grouped with the actual pattern. So to do that, we just go to Object and then Group Selection. So when we move it, the whole thing's moving. At the same time, we're not losing those little bits in between, or those guidelines. Going to get my big selection tool. I'm just simply going to click on this corner and drag it to the corresponding corner of, this is the front panel, this is the side front panel, this is the side back panel, and this is the back panel. So I'm just going to simply, once again, click on that corner and drag it to its corresponding point on the front of the block. And we might have to zoom in, which is Control+ on our keyboard, to make sure that those two are lined up perfectly, which is looking good. Next, I'm going to go to my rotation tool, which is this little handy thing on the left here, sorry. I'm going to click on that rotation tool. I'm going to click on that point. And then I'm just going to click and drag those two lines together until they match. And that's going to start creating this beautiful circular skirt concept. Next, I'm going to do exactly the same with the back side panel. I'm going to get my big selection tool. I'm going to click on this point and drag it over to its corresponding piece on the side front. Let's just zoom in. And it's not quite aligned, so let's just click and drag on that point to line those up. Get my rotation tool, which is actually R, the letter R on your keyboard. Let's zoom out. I'm just going to click on this line and drag it until it intersects its other one. Now we've got a slight little alignment problem there at the bottom here. It's not quite aligned beautifully. You want to make sure that you get that right. You see, it's not quite there. So what I'll do is I'm going to go in again. Let's just move that away, click and drag it in. Now normally these should actually lock, but I've got like a point or something going on that's stopping me from doing that. But let's just zoom right in, let's get it really perfect. There we go. I'm then gonna get my rotation tool, I'm gonna click on that rotation point, let's zoom out, and then now click on that line, and then realign it. And that should be better. Yep, that's perfect, great. I'm gonna do exactly the same with the back panel. I'm gonna grab that point, click and drag it over. So big section tool, click and drag it to meet the other point. Just zoom in quickly. Let's match those two up, and then I'm going to get my rotation tool, click on that point, and then click and drag and rotate that closed. So let's just zoom out and show that process. So I'm just going to click and drag and rotate it until those blocks are aligned. And there we have our beautiful, let's say, A-line dress block and that beautiful circle. Also, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my line tool, and let's just give it a color. So I'm going to click on my line tool. I'm going to double click on this line fill. Let's go for a nice Pattern Lab blue. There we go, click OK. Let's go to my stroke, and let's make it 2-point line. I'm going to click, let's say at this point here, so let's zoom out. I'm going to click and drag a line from the side seam at the hit point. I'm going to click and drag it along that edge. And then what we'll do is get my small selection tool. I'm going to then click on that point and click and drag. Now what it does is, you see, we want to extend through that line. So when it's actually in position, it kind of like highlights in pink. It might be a different color for you depending what settings you have. I'm going to click and drag through, all the way through, past the center front of my block. Just there. So now if we have a look for our center front on our A-line block, so we've clicked and dragged a line through that side seam. I'm then going to go to the center point of my front block, click and drag down, hold down the Shift key to lock your selection to the vertical, and that will locate our center front line, and it also locates where that side seam interacts with the center front line. And I know that this is where the center of my circle is going to be, so I can just simply, with my small selection tool, click on this line, select it, go to my scissor tool and just snip it at that point. And then click on that line and just hit backspace a few times to delete it. And so now we have the point of rotation of our circle. So now I'm going to go to my ellipse tool, I'm going to click, and I'm just going to hover over that central point just there. And I'm going to hold down, the Shift and Option key on my keyboard and then click. And that will bring up the ellipse, let's say width, height dialog box that basically controls the length or the size of our circle or of our ellipse. So here, what I can say is, right, okay, what length do I want this actual dress block to be? So let's do that first of all. So at the moment, let's have a look. So from the side neck point, which is this point here, I'm going to click and draw a line down to the bottom or the base of the skirt. I'm going to hold down my Shift key to lock it to the vertical. So at the moment it is 63.5 centimeters long. Let's say I wanted this dress to be 100 centimeters long. So I'm going to go to my line tool, I'm going to click on this side neck point, and I'm just going to click, and that will give me my line segment tool options. I'm just going to hit 100 centimeters. If you're working in CM, you don't need to add the CM, but if you're not, then just simply click CM afterwards. The angle, obviously it's going to be 270, which means it's going directly vertically down. I'm going to click OK. And that is now 100 centimeters. And we can check that. It was originally 63 something. So 36.5 looks good. So we now know the length of our dress block. However, we want to know the distance from this point here to the length of our dress, or the bottom edge of this 100 centimeter length dress, because this is going to be the center of our circle. So we need to find out what the circumference is, no, sorry, the radius of our circle is, which would be the measurement from here down to the bottom of that dress. So if I just simply get my line tool and I click and drag from that point, hold down my Shift key to lock it to the vertical, and then you see where it lines up? That is 77.1 centimeters. You can see that from that little gray box. So 77.1 centimeters is going to be the radius of our, let's say, circle here. So let's just get our ellipse tool. I'm then going to click. I'm going to hold down my Shift and Option key, and I'm going to click on that little point, bringing up the ellipse toolbox. I think it was 77.1. 77.1. I'm going to do 77.1 for both the width and the height, and I'm going to click OK. And, okay, the reason why is because we need the diameter, not the radius. So essentially, let's hold down the Shift and Option key, click on that point, and here we're going to go 77.1 star, which is times 2, which gives us the diameter, which is 154.2, so 154.2. Then we click OK. Guys, really quick intermission. Make sure you check out the end of this video. We've got some really fantastic news to tell you guys about, which we'd hate for you to miss. So check the end of the video. Just check it, right? And then if I zoom out, it should be, as you can see, it's the perfect length of what we want our dress block to be. So if that's the base of the skirt, you can see it's the perfect length, which is great. So now we're going to lengthen these panels out to make this the bottom of our dress. And we can actually get rid of this side neck point to dress length line. We don't need it anymore. So I'm going to get my big section tool. I'm going to click on that line and hit backspace on my keyboard a few times. So now, in order to lengthen this circular dress, what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend these lines out until we meet the edge of that circle. So I'm going to get my line tool. I'm then going to click and drag. So I'm going to click on the line. This is my side front. This is the line between my side front and my front panel. I'm going to, let's go from this hip line, I'm going to click and drag to the end of the skirt, like so. And then get my small selection tool, click off, click on that line, let's give it maybe a little bit more of a line thickness. Click on that line, and then with my small selection tool, click on that little white point, click and drag, and then as you can see, when I line it up, it goes like a pink color, which is great. And it also says line extension at the very start of that line, and that means you know that it is extending through that line, like so. And that is where the edge of the skirt is going to align to. I'm going to do this all the way around, so I'm going to get my line tool. I'm going to click on this point, then click and drag to the end, and it should lock to that point. I'm going to get my small selection tool, click off, click on the line, click on the end point, click and drag, and then when it turns pink, that is where, and it says line extension, that's an exact extension of this seam line. I'm going to do this all the way around my block. So I'm going to click on that point and drag, get my small selection tool, click off, click on the line, click on the point and then drag, make sure it says line extension, which is great. I'm going to do this all the way around, I'm going to do it for the center front as well. So click and drag to that point, click and drag, make sure it says line extension, there we go, perfect. And then we'll do the front as well. I could do the center front straight down, but then I'd have to reflect this panel, etc., which is a bit of a nightmare. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag this line as well. Small selection tool, click off, click the line, click the point, and then extend through, remembering to find that line extension, that little pink line extension. And there we have, oh, let's just move that back in. So there we have our skirt block extended, which is great. And to be fair, if I decided I didn't want this to be 100 centimeters from the SMP to waist, I could always click on my big section tool, click on the circle here, go to, so I can basically expand and contract it, but also hold down the Option key and it will expand, oh sorry, I haven't done this for a while. Hold down the Shift and Option key on your keyboard and then you can extend, and it extends and, oh sorry, increases and decreases from that central point. So once again, go to your big section tool, you want to click on the circle, you will then want to go to these free transform tools, and if you don't hold down Shift and Option, it'll be an issue. So hold down Shift and Option or Shift and Alt if you're a PC user. I'm a Mac user, so it's Shift and Option. And then click and drag, and that will allow you to extend or contract that circle from that center point, which is great. Anyway, we're not going to do that. We're going to go to that actual baseline. In fact, you know what? I'm just going to hit Command Z to go back, and that's it. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to let's start creating. Let's start finalizing these panels. In other words, because at the moment this is our front block, we want to extend it so we get to this larger out block here. So we can do this one of two ways. What I can do is let's simply get our big selection tool. I can click on this panel here. I can then go Object, Arrange, and then Bring to Front, so it's on the top. And we can maybe make this a line color of pink so we can see it, and we can highlight it as well. What I might do is I might give all of these a different fill color so we can see you know, where they are and what they're doing. So we've gone red, yellow, let's go for blue. Let's go for a dark blue because we've always got the light blue. Let's up the line width to be about 3 or 4. And for the back panel, we can do green perhaps. There we go. And let's go 3 or 4 points. Great. So now you can see all the different individual panels. So I've brought the front panel to the forefront. So once again, big selection tool. I'm going to click on that panel and I'm going to go Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. So now, as I said, I can do this one of two ways. I can either click on this block here with my small selection tool. I can click on this block outline. I can grab this point and extend it all the way down to the bottom. I can click on this point, extend it all the way down to the bottom. And I can then, let's say, bring this point down. I mean, there's a few points going on here. It's a bit of a mess. So I can just go to my cut tool and I can just simply snip that red line out. And then we can just simply get our small selection tool and then just delete that one as well. Let's also extend our center front line down. Just simply grab your small selection tool, click on that point, click and drag down to the base here. We can even give it that red line fill. And then here at the bottom, I'm going to get my small selection tool. I'm going to click on the circle itself. I'm going to get my cut tool and I'm going to snip it at those points. Okay, so now I can join this line to this and that will complete our front block. And I do that simply by clicking on this line here, click on the point, hold down the Shift key, click on that line, click on that point. But as you can see, we've got a slight issue here. Let's just zoom in. So I didn't snip that line very well. I kind of snipped it a little bit far off. So I'm just going to zoom in. Oh, where's it gone? Sorry. I'm doing a very good job today. Let's just zoom into that little area. I'm going to click on that line. I'm going to get my scissor tool. I'm going to snip directly at that point. So obviously the further you zoom in, the better quality your cut lines are going to be. So let's just zoom in. Select that line, get my scissor tool and snip. Let's just zoom out a little bit. And now I can select this line, select the point, hold down the shift key, select the line, select the point, right click, join. And then finally, instead of having to join these 2 points, I can go to my Pathfinder tool. You can also go to Window and then Pathfinder. And I'm just going to click the Unite, and that will basically close that front pattern piece, which is looking great. Also, so that's my front block extended, which is brilliant. So I'm going to show you a different technique of how to do that as well. So I'm just going to hit Command Z on my keyboard to go back to where we were, go back through all of those different iterations, or let's say movements. So there's a different way we can do this, so by using the Pathfinder tool. So what I can do is select the outline of my circle, get my scissor tool, I can snip it at that point. Once again, that's not a great snip location, so let's zoom in. And let's get my scissor tool, I'm going to snip at that point. Let's go across, I'm going to snip at that point. Perfect. And I'm then going to remove this line here, and I can even remove this line as well. I can then get my red tool, or my red, let's say pattern outline here, and I can snip at this point and this point. And then I can just simply select that middle circle line, hit backspace a few times. And here I can select this line, select the end point, hold down the shift key, select the line, select the point, and then right click, join. And then here I can just simply click the Unite tool. So if I got this selected, just hit Pathfinder Unite, and it will close that block. And that might actually be a slightly quicker way than the way I did it before, so I'm going to continue doing it in that manner. So now the front block's complete. What I might do is I might just lock this so it doesn't interfere with the other pattern pieces. So big selection tool, click on this block, object, and then lock, selection. So now we can't actually select it. Well, we can select the middle line because it wasn't grouped, but we can't select the other pieces. So once again here, I'm going to get my yellow one. So this is my side front panel. I'm then going to, so big section tool, select the side front panel, go object, and then arrange, bring to front. We just want it on top of all the other panel pieces so it's easy to edit and access. I'm then going to go to my scissor tool, and I'm going to snip it at that corner, and then get my small section tool, select that line, hit backspace. You could always leave it on the pattern if you wanted to remember what the existing pattern looked like. Then let's get my small section tool, select on this bottom line here. We need to cut it at this point. It's already been cut here. So let's select the line and then get our scissor tool. Let's snip that point there. Let's get our small section tool. I'm going to click on this point and then going to click on this line, click on that point, right click, join. And then we're going to unite just to close that block. And then we can zoom out and I can go object, lock, selection. Let's zoom in, let's do the next panel piece. So once again, this is the side back panel. I'm going to click on this panel piece, going to go object, arrange, bring to front. I'm going to get my scissor tool, I'm going to snip it here, and this time, you know what, I'm going to make that a guideline. So I get my small section tool, going to click on that line, it's now separated from that block. Go to my eyedropper tool, I'm going to pick up the line attributes and apply it to this one using the eyedropper tool. But we're going to have to lock this because it's going to get in the way of our block. So let's just click on this line, object, lock, selection. But then I'm going to go to my bottom line here, this circular line, and I need to snip it at this point. So I'm going to select it with my small selection tool. I'm going to get my scissor tool and snip it at this point. I'm going to select the line, select the point, hold down the shift key, click this line, click that point, right click, join, and then with it all selected, we can then use the Pathfinder Unite tool, which closes the block. And what we can do is just go, so this has obviously been locked, so we're going to go to Object, Unlock All, which means our other panels are unlocked as well, but that's fine. And I can then simply click this, and it's all one piece, which is great. Let's now do it to the back block. So once again, I'm going to select this. Let's get my big section tool. I'm going to select the side back panel, side front, and front panel. I'm going to go Object, and then just Lock Selection, so it's out of the way. I'm then going to go to my green panel, which is my back panel. I'm going to go to Object. So once again, big section tool, click on that block, Object, transform, sorry, arrange, bring to front. I'm going a little bit crazy. It's Friday after all. Okay, and what I'm doing is going to select the bottom edge with my small section tool, click the bottom edge, scissor tool, I'm going to snip and snip, small section tool. I can keep this, I can maybe select it with my small selection tool, get my eyedropper, pick up the attributes of that line. Great stuff. I can just go lock it, objects, lock, selection, if you want to keep that in there. And then I'm going to find my circle, which is just here, get my small selection tool, select that circular line, get the scissor tool and snip it. And now, as you can see, I don't actually need this circle here because we've kind of used that guide. So I can get my small selection tool, select it, and then hit backspace. And then finally, I can then select this line, select that little point there, hold down my shift key, select that line, select that point, right click, join. And then I can use my unite to just finalize that block. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to object and then unlock all. And you can see that we have our front panel. Oops, hang on. We have a front panel. To be fair, I'm going to get my big section tool, click and drag over that center front line as well, and then go object and then group, just so when we move it, that line is also contained. I'm going to click and drag that over so you can see we have all of our different pattern pieces here, which is looking great. Perfect. But we can also remove these existing sort of like little crappy lines as well that we use as guides. So let me just take this back to where it was. I'm going to get my big section tool, I'm going to click on all of these little panels here. I'm going to go object and then lock selection. And now if I get my big section tool and click and drag over the whole area, I can then just move these out and obviously delete them. And so now we have our lovely finished pattern. Let's just go object, unlock all, and here we have our pattern. But now we need to basically align it so that it is all in a row. In other words, so the waistlines all match up. But what I'm going to do is, because I want to eventually shorten this, so I've obviously showed you how to extend it, I want to show you how to shorten it. I'm just going to click and drag and move this over to one side. I'm going to go edit, copy, edit, paste. So we have a new one, and then I'm going to basically extend these, or let's say unrotate them. So to do that, really simple, let's just take big section tool, click and drag on all of them except for the front one. Let's grab my side front panel. I'm going to click and drag. So with my big section tool, I'm going to click on that point and drag it to the waist position. Let's just zoom in here. There we go. It's going to move that into position. Going to get to my rotation tool. Going to click on that point and I'm going to rotate it until you see how that locks and it has like a pink line. That means it's directly on the horizontal. So I've now lined up that pattern piece. So we can move this away. So that's our side front panel. We can get our side back panel. Once again, I'm going to click and drag. So big section tool, click on that point, drag it over to that waistline. Probably going to have to zoom in to make sure those points match. Click and drag, perfect. Oops. Click and drag, perfect. Get my rotation tool. Click on that point, rotate this down until we get that lock, which is our perfect horizontal. Let's just drag that out a little bit so we can see these patterns. Same for the back. Going to get my big selection tool. Going to click on that block and drag it to match up with the side seam, side back panel waistline. Click and drag, get it into position. Looks good. Get my rotation tool, click on that point, click and drag until it locks to that horizontal, which is looking great. So that is how we then move our patterns back into position. What you can see here is, look, I haven't got that quite perfectly. That center back is not aligned beautifully. So what we can do is we can get our line tool. I can click and drag, hold down my shift key to lock it to the vertical. You can see that pattern's not aligned. Then get my big section tool. I can click on this pattern here. I can then go to my rotation tool, click on that point, and then we can just swing it into perfect position. And let's just, get my big section tool, remove that line. So just select it, hit backspace on your keyboard. So now we have our patterns all beautifully translated out, and we can then obviously add our seam allowance, our grey lines. We can also change that back to black, etc. But anyway, so that's how we've done the long version. So now how do we actually shorten this block? So let's go back to our existing, let's say, little transformation here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this line. So small selection tool, click and drag, delete it, click and drag, delete. So now I'm going to shorten this block, and we do it in exactly the same way. Unfortunately, I lost my guideline. You see here, we had that guideline that went out to the center front. So I'm going to have to put that back in again. So let's just click on this line. I'm going to click and drag along that side seam. I'm going to get my small selection tool, click off, click on that point, and then drag it until we meet that center front line. And once again, you're looking for that line extension pink text at the bottom of the line. And that's looking pretty much perfect on the center front line. So that is our point of rotation. And what I could do is get an ellipse tool here, hold down my, actually let's click off, get my ellipse tool, hold down the Shift and Option key on my keyboard, click and drag out to create a circle. Let's make this black. Let's also remove that dashed line. And you know what, my pattern pieces are looking pretty crazy heavy, so I'm going to get my big section tool, click and drag over all of them. Let's take this down to 1 point to make them a little bit easier to see. So that's my rotation point, which is great. Actually, let's make them 2 points. There we go. So that's my rotation point. I'm now going to get my ellipse tool, do exactly the same thing as before, hold down the Shift and Option key on my keyboard, click on the center of that point, and then here I'm going to, let's just make it, I don't know, 75, let's make it up. But don't forget, we want to make it the diameter. So let's just go back. Let's do it properly. I'm going to get a line, and this is obviously 100 centimeters from our side neck point. So let's say I want our dress to be 50 centimeters from the side neck point. That's going to be a very, very, very short skirt, but let's just do it anyway. I'm going to click on this point here, and I'm going to type 50 centimeters. 270 is the angle of degrees. Click OK. And that is how short our little dress is going to be. So you know what? Let's make it a little bit longer. Let's make it about 60. So click on that point there. Let's make it 65. Click OK. That's a little bit more like it. Now let's make it 60. Then it will be short. Click OK. That's great. Now once again, if you remember, we want to measure the distance from this point to the bottom of that dress. Okay, so we do that by getting our line tool. We click on that point. I'm going to click and drag, hold down my Shift key to lock it to the vertical. I'm going to drag it down until it intersects the line, that green SMP to dress length line, which is 37.1 centimeters, which is our radius, but we want the diameter. So 37.1, I'm going to get my ellipse tool, click on the center. I'm going to click on the center of that point, and I'm going to make this 37.1 times 2, because we want the diameter, not the radius, which gives us 74.2, and let's just click OK. And so now this is going to be the new, let's say, length of our A-line dress. So the skirt is going to be to here, which is not that far below the hip line, so it's going to be a little bit raunchy, but we're not actually going to make this dress, so it doesn't matter. So now what I'm going to do is, once again, I am going to start to shorten this block. Now this should be a slightly easier process because we haven't got to extend, the lines are already there. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to get my big section tool, and I'm going to start cutting this circle up into little sections. I'm going to get my scissor tool, I'm going to start at the center, well, at this point here, I'm going to click. I'm going to then snip at this point, I'm going to snip at this point, and then here it might be a little bit tricky because we have that point in the way. There's a point just there, so I'm zooming in, and then I'm just going to snip at that point, get a bit more precision, and snip at that point. Let's zoom out. And now I can get my small selection tool, click on that line that we don't actually need, and hit backspace a few times on my keyboard. So this is our new length, and they're all now been separated up into individual little sections, which is grand. So let's go in and start with the front panel. So get my big section tool, click on the front panel. I'm going to Object, Arrange, I'm going to bring it to the front so it's easier to edit, because basically when it sits on top of all the other panels, it means that when you select that line or when you cut that line, it is easier to cut because it's lying on top of everything else. So we're just zoomed in. I'm going to go to my scissor tool, and I'm just going to snip it at that point and that point. Then I'm going to get my small section tool. I'm going to select that red outline because we've snipped it away from the other part of the dress. I'm going to hit backspace a few times. And I can even get my center front here, get my small section tool, click and drag on that end point, hold down the Shift key to lock it to the vertical, and just move that up to the finished line. And then get my small section tool. I can just simply click and drag over these two end points, right click, join, then go to my Pathfinder and then click the Unite button. And now I get my big section tool, I can click on that front panel and I can just go Object and then Lock Selection. Next we're going to go for the yellow one, which is our side front panel. I'm going to get my big selection tool, I'm going to click on the yellow one, go Object, Arrange, bring to front, make it easier to select and cut. Go to my cut tool, snip, snip, and then small section tool, click and drag over that bottom edge. If I were to select it with the big section tool, we would select the whole pattern because it's grouped. So always make sure if you're selecting elements within a group to use the small selection tool. Let's just select that and then hit backspace a few times. Now because we locked our front panel here, we can't edit it, which means when we click and drag over these two endpoints, we're only accessing the block and this circle endpoints, which is really useful. If this wasn't selected, we'd select all 4 points and then we couldn't right click and join because you can only join 2 points at any one time. So so once again, this is locked. So I'm going to get my small selection tool. I'm going to click and drag over those two endpoints, right click, join. Go to my Pathfinder and just unite that pattern. Let's go big section tool. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to go object and then lock selection. It's always good to be very methodical when it comes to pattern cutting in Adobe Illustrator. It'll save you time in the long run. So I'm going to get my small section tool. I'm going to select the outline of that block. Scissor tool. I'm just going to snip. Actually, sorry, you know what? I need to bring this to the front. So I'm going to get my big section tool, click on that block to select all of it. Object, arrange, bring to front. There was me talking about being methodical. I'm going to get my scissor tool and I'm just going to snip. I'm going to cut there and cut there as well. Small selection tool, click and drag, hit backspace. And then once again, we lock this so it's not going to get in the way. Small selection tool, click and drag, right click, join, and then unite. Same for this one here. So sorry, methodical, of course. Let's click, big section tool, click and drag over that block, object, lock, selection. Let's grab this one, object, arrange, bring to front, scissor tool, snip, snip. Small selection tool, click and drag, hit backspace. Small selection tool, click and drag, right click, join, unite. And there we have our very short A-line dress, which isn't really a dress, it's more like an A-line peplum top or something. And then once again, as we did before, we can just simply click and drag this out. If you want to, we can get our line tool. I can click and drag from the center of that waistline. It's not quite the center. Let's go from the line, click and drag, hold down the shift key to lock it to the horizontal. And then we can use this line instead to line up these blocks. So my side front, get my big selection tool. Are these all unlocked? Yeah, they are. So basically I just unlocked that whole selection. Just remember you just get object and then unlock all. Going to get my big section tool, click on that point, drag it to that waistline, and then we can just nudge it up with our arrow keys. You can actually use the arrow keys to nudge things around if you have them selected. Get to my rotation point, click, rotate, click on that point. Rotation tool, which is R on your keyboard, click and drag, rotate it in position. Same with the back, put it into position. Click on the rotation point and rotate it into position. To be fair, the back is not always straight, so once again, like before, get your line tool. You can then click and drag, hold down the shift key to align to vertical, click on your block with the big selection tool, click the rotation button, rotate, and there, oops, not right click, just delete that, and there we have our beautiful short and long A-line dresses. Let's just remove that. So we have our long version and we have our short version, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and so now what we can do is we can then obviously take some color off of here and actually turn them back into patterns. So let's just get our small selection tool, click and drag over all of this. Let's take the pointage down to 1. There we go. And we can also click and drag over the whole thing, and then we can make the line color black. Click OK. And now we can do this all in one go. We've actually got a tutorial on adding seam allowance to a pattern, but I'll do it here as well, just for a bit of fun. Click and drag small selection tool over all of these elements. Actually, what we can do is, let's get small selection tool, click on this panel, hold down the shift key, click on this one, and this one. So we're just selecting the outlines here. Click on all of those outlines, go to object, path, offset path, and then we're going to add 1 centimeter. I mean, you could add 2 centimeters if you want, or 1.5. Let's just add 1 centimeter. Click OK, and there we have our seam allowance added. I'm going to jump that up to 2 points just to make it a little bit bolder. And there is our A-line pattern blocks. And once again, with the whole seam allowance concept, you might have to clean it up. So here we might just remove that point. There we go. But yeah, it's looking good. Okay, so that is basically how you increase or decrease the length of an A-line skirt just by joining those panels together at the side front, the side seam, the side back, finding that center of rotation, and then obviously drawing your circle and extending that circle proportionately out from the center point. Okay, we have just launched a range of brand new basic leotard blocks in sizes UK 4 all the way to 22 on the designlab.london website. There are 5 different leg hole styles to choose from, and they're all fully editable digital patterns. Next week's tutorial is going to focus on how to adapt these leotard blocks into a range of different designs. So it should be an awesome tutorial. Anyway, so don't forget to download your leotard blocks in preparation for that tutorial. There should be a link in the top right-hand corner. Also, next week, we're going to be launching a series of bikini and swimwear blocks also on the designlab.london website. So keep an eye out for those. And in the meantime, if you're looking for more stretch blocks, then check out our dancewear page on the designlab.london website. There is a lot happening on Design Lab right now. Anyway, finally, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and also turn on your notifications. We have got loads more great content coming your way every single week, and we'd also hate for you to miss out on that. Anyway, guys, take care, have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you next week. Take care.